Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We've still got people joining, so we're going to give it another minute or two before we get started. Just sit tight, and we'll get going in a few minutes. Thanks.